The Valdrian Empire stretched across 12 star systems, a glittering jewel of advanced civilization that made Earth look like a backwater colony. At its heart sat Emperor Korath on a throne carved from living crystal, his body towering 10 feet tall and shimmering within a light. His species lived for thousands of years, watching civilizations rise and fall like seasons changing. But all that power meant nothing 6 months ago when a simple transport malfunction took his wife. The palace had become a tomb. Servants walked on tiptoe through marble halls that once echoed with laughter. The gardens, where Empress Seelith had cultivated rare flowers from 100 worlds, now grew wild and untended. Nobody had the heart to touch her work. Korath's 3 daughters felt her absence like a physical wound. Lysera, the eldest at 47 years old, locked herself in the diplomatic archives. By Valdrian standards, she was barely a teenager. She'd throw herself into trade agreements and territorial disputes, anything to avoid the empty chair at dinner. Her crystalline skin, which should have glowed with vibrant purples and blues, had faded to dull gray. Myra, 35, spent her days in the engineering workshops, taking apart machines and forgetting to put them back together. She'd inherited her mother's brilliant mind but lost the joy that made creation meaningful. The other engineers learned to leave her alone when they found her staring at half-finished projects, tears leaving streak marks down her translucent face. Little Venna, only 18, had it worst of all. She was young enough to still need a mother's guidance, old enough to understand death's permanence. She'd wander the palace like a ghost, clutching a small holo device that projected her mother's image, watching the same messages over and over until the battery died. The Emperor tried. He really did. But every time he looked at his daughters, he saw Seelith's eyes staring back. Every conversation died in his throat, choked by grief he didn't know how to express. His species prided themselves on logic and long-term thinking. They weren't supposed to crumble like this. So the palace staff did their best to fill the silence. They failed miserably. That's when Emily Brooks showed up, completely by accident and totally unprepared for any of this. The Valdrian Empire had started a diversity initiative 5 years back, hiring species from across the galaxy to prove they valued all life forms equally. It was mostly for show. The good jobs went to long-lived species like the Valdrians or the methane-breathing Korthax. Short-lived species got janitorial work. Emily was human, which meant she'd be lucky to see 80 years. To the Valdrians, she was basically a mayfly with thumbs. The hiring manager had been polite but clear during her interview. Don't expect advancement, don't bother the important people, and definitely don't talk to the royal family. She got assigned to the residential wing with a mop and a bucket. Emily had taken the job because Earth needed the money. Her planet was still recovering from the expansion wars, and imperial currency spent well back home. She figured she'd clean floors for a few years, send money to her sister's kids, maybe see some cool alien architecture. She wasn't expecting a palace full of grief so thick you could taste it. On her 3rd day, she was polishing the floors in the eastern garden when she heard crying. Not the dignified, quiet tears of someone trying to maintain composure. Ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that sounded like they were being ripped from someone's chest. The smart move would have been walking away. Emily had been specifically told not to bother the princesses. But she'd been raised by a single mom who taught her that you don't leave people hurting if you can help. She found Venna curled up behind a fountain, her whole body shaking, that little holo device clutched in her hands. The projection showed a beautiful Valdrian woman laughing, her colors dancing like northern lights. "Hey," Emily said softly, setting down her bucket. "You okay?" Venna looked up, startled. Her eyes were these incredible violet things, currently puffy and red-rimmed. She stared at Emily like she'd forgotten other people existed. "You're the human," Venna said, her voice rough. "Emily. And you're Princess Venna." Emily sat down on the ground, not caring that her uniform would get dirty. "That your mom?" Venna nodded, a fresh wave of tears spilling over. "I miss her." "Yeah," Emily said simply. "That's the worst part, isn't it? The missing." Something in Venna's expression shifted. The other servants always got uncomfortable when she cried, making excuses and hurrying away. This human just sat there, not judging, not offering useless platitudes. "Why do humans leak from their eyes?" Venna asked suddenly. "When they're sad, I mean. I've seen it in the documentaries." Emily smiled despite herself. "We call them tears. Salt water, mostly. Scientists say it's our body's way of releasing stress hormones, but my mom always said crying was just feelings that got too big to keep inside." "Your mother is wise." "Was," Emily corrected gently. "She died 4 years ago. Cancer." Venna's eyes widened. You understand? Yeah, kiddo. I understand. They sat there for a long time, watching the fountain and not saying much. Emily didn't try to make it better or tell Venna that time heals all wounds or any of that garbage. She just sat with her, the way her mom had sat with her during the worst nights. When Venna finally spoke again, her voice was small. Does it ever stop hurting? Emily considered that. Nope. But it changes. Get softer around the edges. You learn to carry it better. She paused. My mom used to say that grief is just love with nowhere to go. The fact that it hurts so much means you loved her that much. That's not a bad thing. Venna clutched her holo device tighter. Everyone wants me to stop crying. To move on. Everyone's an idiot then, Emily said bluntly, and was rewarded with a shocked laugh from the princess. You cry as much as you need. Anybody gives you trouble, send them to me. I'm real good with a mop. For the first time in 6 months, Venna smiled. It was small, fragile, and didn't quite reach her eyes. But it was real. Neither of them noticed Emperor Korath watching from a balcony above, witnessing a short-lived human doing what he'd failed to do for half a year. Reaching his daughter where she hurt. News traveled fast in the palace, especially gossip about the royal family. Within 2 days, every servant knew that Princess Venna had spent an hour talking with the new human cleaner. Most thought it was a fluke, a momentary lapse in judgment from a grieving child. They expected Emily to be reassigned to the waste processing levels by week's end. Instead, something stranger happened. Lysra started noticing Emily around the palace. Hard not to, really. The human was the only one who didn't practically bow and scrape when a princess walked by. She'd just nod politely and keep working, like royalty was no big deal. It was refreshing in an irritating sort of way. The real confrontation came on a Thursday afternoon. Lysra had been avoiding her mother's study for months. The door stayed locked, the research inside untouched. Everyone agreed it was too painful, too soon. Better to let time pass, they said. Give it a few years. But Lysra couldn't stop thinking about her mother's final project, a comprehensive study of cross-species botanical integration. Decades of work, just sitting there, gathering dust. Her mother would have hated that. She finally worked up the courage to open the door. The study looked exactly as Seelith had left it. Data tablets stacked haphazardly, plant samples in various stages of analysis, notes scrawled in her mother's distinctive handwriting. Lysra made it 3 steps inside before the grief hit her like a physical blow. That's when she saw Emily, kneeling by the workspace, carefully organizing tablets into chronological order. What are you doing? Lysra's voice came out sharper than intended, touched with panic. Nobody's supposed to be in here. This is private, this is. I know, Emily said calmly, not stopping her work. Your sister Venna mentioned your mom was a botanist. I saw the study was getting dusty, figured someone should at least preserve the research properly. Hate to see years of work get ruined by environmental damage. Lysra felt her skin flicker with anger, colors shifting to warning reds. You have no right. You don't understand what this means, you can't just. You're right, I can't understand, Emily interrupted, finally looking up. Her brown eyes were kind but firm. I didn't know your mom. But I know what it's like to watch someone's life work sit untouched because everyone's too scared to deal with it. She stood up, wiping dust off her knees. When my mom died, her office at the university stayed locked for 8 months. Nobody wanted to be the one to pack it up. Finally, my sister and I did it ourselves. Found all these half-finished papers, research she'd been excited about. We could have let it rot, but that felt like killing her twice. Lysra's anger drained away, replaced by something rawer. What did you do? Finished what we could. Published her final papers posthumously. Donated her samples to other researchers who could use them. Emily gestured at the organized tablets. Your mom's work deserves better than becoming a shrine nobody touches. She was a scientist, right? Scientists want their work to continue. Something broke inside Lysra. She'd been holding herself together through sheer stubbornness, but this human's simple logic cut right through her defenses. She sank into her mother's chair and finally let herself cry. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a princess, but messy, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Emily didn't run away like the Valdrian servants would have. She just pulled up another chair and sat quietly, occasionally handing Lysra tissues from her cleaning cart. When Lysra could breathe again, Emily spoke softly. My mom used to say the best way to honor someone is to keep their dreams alive. Not frozen in time, but actually living and growing. She picked up one of the data tablets. This cross-pollination study looks fascinating. Must have taken years. 17, Lysra whispered. She wanted to prove that organic matter from different worlds could coexist without genetic modification. Everyone said it was impossible. Was she close to proving them wrong? Lysra actually looked at the research for the first time in months. Really looked at it. Maybe. She had some promising results with the Antaran moss and Terran. She stopped, realizing what she was doing. Talking about her mother's work without drowning in grief. Emily smiled. See? That's the thing about humans. We've only got maybe 80 years if we're lucky, so we get real good at making sure we leave something behind. Your mom had centuries, but she worked like she had my lifespan. That's special. They spent the next 3 hours going through the research together. Emily asked questions that seemed naive but forced Lysra to explain things clearly, to see her mother's work with fresh eyes. The human's perspective, unburdened by Valdrian assumptions, highlighted connections Lysra had missed. You know what's weird? Emily said as they catalogued the final set of samples. You explain stuff exactly like your mom wrote in her notes. Same enthusiasm, same way of breaking down complex ideas. She'd be proud of that. Lysra felt her skin pulse with warm golds and greens, colors she hadn't shown in months. You think so? Definitely. Legacy isn't just what someone leaves behind. It's who they shaped while they were here. Emily stood up, stretching her back. Anyway, I should get back to actual cleaning before I get fired. But if you ever want help organizing more of this stuff, I'm around. Meanwhile, Myra was having her own crisis in the engineering bay. The music box sat on her workbench, thoroughly disassembled. It was older than most human civilizations, a gift from her mother on Myra's 10th birthday. The mechanism that played the melody had seized up 2 weeks after the funeral, and Myra couldn't bring herself to fix it. Every time she tried, her hands shook too badly to work. 3 master technicians had examined it. All concluded the same thing. The quantum resonance chamber was too degraded, the molecular structure too fragile. Repair was impossible without completely rebuilding it, which would destroy its sentimental value. Myra had accepted that. Or tried to. She found Emily studying the disassembled pieces with intense concentration, a maintenance scanner in one hand. Don't touch that. Myra lunged forward, panic making her clumsy. Emily carefully set down the scanner. Sorry, I was just cleaning the workbench and got curious. This is incredible craftsmanship. Early 4th dynasty, right? The harmonics must have been beautiful. Were beautiful, Myra corrected bitterly. It's broken. Beyond repair, apparently. Emily picked up the quantum resonance chamber, turning it gently in the light. Who told you that? 3 master technicians. The decay is irreversible. Here. Emily grabbed a magnification lens. Mind if I try something? Myra wanted to say no. This was her mother's gift, her last working connection to Seelitha's voice. But something in the human's confidence made her pause. You think you can fix what master technicians couldn't? Probably not, Emily admitted cheerfully. But humans have this saying, nothing's unfixable, just expensive or impractical. We're real stubborn about mechanical problems. Comes from living on a planet that tried to kill us for most of our evolution. She pulled out a small toolkit from her cleaning supplies. See, Valdrian tech is built to last millennia, so when it breaks, you guys assume it's done. Human tech breaks every Tuesday, so we got real good at improvising repairs. Myra watched, fascinated despite herself, as Emily worked. The human didn't try to restore the quantum chamber. Instead, she bypassed it entirely, rigging a hybrid system using common resonance coils and what looked like parts from an atmospheric regulator. This is completely unorthodox, Myra breathed. The harmonic ratios shouldn't work with those components. Yeah, it's ugly as hell from an engineering standpoint, Emily agreed, her tongue sticking out slightly as she concentrated. But pretty doesn't matter if it works, right? She made one final connection and pressed the activation switch. The music box sang. It wasn't perfect. The tone was slightly different, the harmonics not quite as pure as Myra remembered. But it was her mother's melody, the lullaby Seelith had hummed while working late nights in the lab, the song that meant home and safety and love. Myra's vision blurred with tears. How did you? Sometimes the old way's not the only way, Emily said softly. It's different, but different isn't always bad. Your mom's song is still here. Just needed someone stubborn enough to find a new path to it. Myra clutched the music box to her chest, letting herself cry while her mother's melody filled the workshop. Emily quietly cleaned up the scattered parts, giving the princess her privacy while staying close enough that Myra didn't feel alone. By the time Emperor Korath heard about both incidents, the entire palace staff was buzzing with rumors about the human maid who was somehow reaching his unreachable daughters. He didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. The Festival of Starlight was the most important celebration in the Valdrian calendar. It honored the founding of the empire and, more intimately, celebrated the bonds between mothers and daughters. For centuries, the royal family had led the ceremonial rituals in the Grand Plaza, watched by millions across 12 star systems. This year, everyone dreaded it. The ceremony required mothers and daughters to perform synchronized light displays, their crystalline bodies creating patterns that told stories of love and lineage. Without Empress Seelith, the three princesses were expected to perform alone, a public acknowledgement that their family was broken. Protocol demanded it. Tradition allowed no alternatives. The girls had been preparing for weeks, going through the motions with dead eyes and forced smiles. 3 days before the festival, Emily found all three sisters sitting in the garden, looking miserable. Venna was crying quietly, Myra stared at nothing, and Lysra had that rigid expression people get when they're holding themselves together by force of will alone. Rough day? Emily asked, sitting down uninvited with her lunch bag. The festival's in 3 days, Venna said miserably. We have to do the mother-daughter ceremony. Alone. In front of everyone. Emily unwrapped her sandwich, considering this. That sounds terrible. Can't you skip it? It's tradition, Lysra said stiffly. The royal family has performed the ceremony of light for 800 years. We can't just not show up. Sure you can. People skip stuff all the time. Myra let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. You really don't understand Valdrian culture, do you? Nope, Emily agreed cheerfully. I'm just a human janitor who thinks making 3 grieving kids perform for millions of people is pretty messed up, tradition or not. Silence fell. Nobody had actually said it out loud before. Everyone had been so focused on what protocol demanded that nobody questioned whether protocol was cruel. We have to honor Mother, Lysra said, but her voice wavered. This is how we show respect. Is it though? Emily took a bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. Because from where I'm sitting, your mom would probably hate watching you three torture yourselves. What kind of mother wants her kids to suffer in her name? Venna looked up sharply. What would humans do? Emily thought about her own mother's funeral, the wake afterward where her sister had told funny stories that made everyone laugh through their tears. Humans would celebrate her life instead of performing grief. We'd tell stories, share memories, maybe do something she loved. Make it about her, not about how sad we are. We could modify the ceremony, Myra said slowly, her engineering mind engaging with the problem. The traditional patterns aren't actually required by law, just by custom. If we created new sequences that represented Mother's work, her passions. The council would never approve, Lysra countered, but Emily could hear the hope creeping into her voice. So don't ask permission. Humans have this saying, it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Emily grinned. Besides, what are they gonna do? You're princesses. The sisters looked at each other, something passing between them. For the first time in months, they weren't drowning separately. They were planning together. They spent the next 2 days reimagining the ceremony. Emily helped where she could, offering a human perspective on celebration versus mourning. Instead of somber light patterns showing loss, they created displays representing Seelith's botanical work, her laughter, the silly jokes she'd made at dinner. They wove in colors she'd loved, rhythms from her favorite music. It felt right. It felt like their mother. The night before the festival, all 3 princesses showed up at Emily's tiny quarters in the servants' wing. She opened the door to find them standing there, looking nervous and determined. We need to ask you something, Lysra said formally. Emily stepped aside to let them in, confused. Her room barely fit all 4 of them. Okay, shoot. The sisters exchanged glances. Finally, Venna, always the bravest about feelings, blurted it out, can you be our mom? Emily nearly dropped the glass of water she'd been holding. What? Not replace her, Myra said quickly, words tumbling out in a rush. Never replace her. But tomorrow, for the ceremony, could you stand with us? We've modified the ritual, and there's a part for a maternal figure, and we thought maybe. You're the closest thing we have, Venna finished quietly. You listen to us. You help us. You make things better. That's what moms do, right? Emily sat down heavily on her bed, mind reeling. She was 28 years old, a janitor from Earth who'd taken this job because she needed the money. These were alien princesses who'd lived for thousands of years, who belonged to a civilization that made humanity look like children playing with blocks. "I'm nobody," she said finally. "You're asking me to stand in front of billions of people." "We're asking you to stand with us," Lysra corrected. "Please. You've done more for us in 2 months than anyone else has managed in half a year." Emily looked at their faces, so full of hope and fear and desperate need. She thought about her own mother, about the lessons that mattered. About showing up for people when they needed you. "No," she said. All three sisters visibly deflated. Vena's eyes filled with tears. Myra turned away. Lysra's expression went carefully blank. "Wait, let me finish," Emily said urgently. "I can't be your mom. Your mother was extraordinary. She was brilliant and loving and irreplaceable. I could never fill that void, and honestly, it would be wrong to try." She stood up, looking each princess in the eye. "But I can be someone who cares about you. Someone who'll listen when you're hurting and celebrate when you're happy. Someone who'll tell you the truth even when it's hard. I can be your friend, your confidant, maybe even family. Just a different kind." Emily moved to kneel, then remembered Valdrian's found that gesture offensive and simply made herself smaller, looking up at them. "You don't need a replacement mother. You need people who love you for who you are, not what you represent. I can be that person, if you'll have me." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Your mom sounds like she was amazing. Honor her by being the incredible people she raised you to be. Don't try to fill her space, because nobody can. Instead, carry her forward. Let her love live through the way you treat others, the kindness you show, the work you do." "But will you stand with us tomorrow?" Vena asked, voice small. "Of course I will," Emily said simply. "That's what family does. The real kind, the chosen kind. We show up." Lysra, who hadn't cried in front of anyone except Emily that day in her mother's study, stepped forward and wrapped her arms around the small human. Her sisters joined in, creating a tangle of crystalline limbs and soft human warmth. "Mother always said the universe brings us what we need, not what we expect," Lysra whispered. "I never understood until now." They stayed like that for a long time, for people from different worlds finding comfort in chosen connection. Outside, the palace buzzed with preparations for tomorrow's ceremony. Nobody knew yet that these three princesses were about to shock the entire empire. Emily pulled back finally, wiping her eyes. "Okay, so logistically speaking, I have no idea what I'm doing tomorrow. Someone's gonna have to teach me these light pattern things, and I gotta warn you, I'm probably gonna mess it up. Humans don't exactly glow." "You won't be doing the light patterns," Myra explained. "There's a part where the maternal figure stands witness while we perform. You just have to be there. And maybe hold my hand during the scary part," Vena added shyly. Emily smiled. "I can definitely do that. Fair warning though, I'm wearing my cleaning uniform. It's literally all I own that's nice enough." "We'll handle that," Lysra said with the first genuine smile Emily had seen from her. "By tomorrow, you'll look like you belong." "I'm a human janitor standing with alien royalty. I absolutely do not belong." "Yes," Myra said firmly. "You do. Because we say so." And somehow, in that cramped servants' quarters with second-hand furniture and walls that needed painting, something shifted. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something new growing in the space beside the grief. When the sisters finally left, Emily sat alone in the darkness, wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. In 24 hours, she'd be standing in front of billions of people, participating in a sacred ceremony she barely understood. Her mother would have loved this. The absurdity of it, the impossible beauty of connection across species and stars. "Well, Mom," Emily whispered to the empty room, "hope I make you proud tomorrow. Pretty sure I'm about to either change history or get fired. Maybe both." She laughed, wiped her eyes one more time, and went to bed. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. The morning of the Festival of Starlight, the Imperial Palace exploded into chaos. High Chancellor Vexa burst into Emperor Koritha's private chambers at dawn, tablet in hand, skin flashing angry crimson. "Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me your daughters did not actually register a human servant as their ceremonial companion for today's ritual." Korith, who'd been reviewing the day's schedule over his morning meditation, felt something cold settle in his chest. "What? The human. The cleaner. They've listed her as standing witness in the ceremony of light. In front of 12 billion viewers across the empire." Vex's voice climbed higher with each word. "This is unprecedented. It's scandalous. It's their choice, Karth heard himself say, surprising himself. Vexa stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Your Majesty, with respect, this human has been here for 2 months. 2 months. She's a short-lived species with no understanding of our culture, our traditions, our daughters are smiling again, Karth interrupted quietly. For the first time since Seelith died, they're eating, studying, talking. Lysra finished her mother's botanical research last week. Myra designed a new transport system. Venna actually laughed yesterday. I heard her. He stood, his full height making even Vexa step back. So yes, Chancellor. If my daughters want this human beside them today, then that's exactly what will happen. But after Vexa left, muttering about protocols and propriety, Karth sat alone with his doubts. He'd been watching Emily for weeks now, ever since that first day with Venna in the garden. He'd seen her organize Seelith's research, repair the music box, sit with his daughters during meals in the servants' quarters. He'd watched his children come back to life. And it terrified him. Because Emily Brooks would be dead in 60 years, maybe less. Humans were fragile, short-lived creatures. His daughters would barely reach middle age by Valdrian standards before they'd lose her too. Was he letting them get attached to someone who'd just leave them grieving all over again? He needed answers. He needed to understand what this human thought she was doing. Emily was in the royal preparation chambers, looking absolutely terrified while 3 attendants tried to fit her with ceremonial robes. The fabric kept pooling around her feet because, well, she was 5'4" and the robes were made for 10-foot Valdrians. Just roll up the bottom, Emily was saying. Nobody's gonna notice, oh. She'd spotted Emperor Karth in the doorway. Every attendant in the room immediately bowed and scrambled out, leaving them alone. Your Majesty, Emily said, attempting an awkward curtsy that got tangled in the 2 long robes. She nearly fell, caught herself, and gave up. Okay, I'm terrible at this formal stuff. Sorry. Despite everything, Karth felt his lips twitch. I noticed. May I speak with you? Sure. I mean, yes, Your Majesty. Obviously. Emily gestured at a bench. Want to sit? Or do emperors not sit? I honestly don't know the rules. They Saturday. Karth studied this small human who'd somehow become essential to his daughter's happiness. Up close, she was even more fragile than he'd thought. Soft skin instead of crystal, bones that would break easily, eyes that would dim in just decades. My daughters have asked you to stand with them today, he said finally. Yeah. I tried to talk them out of it, for what it's worth. Told them I'd probably mess everything up. Emily fidgeted with the robe's sleeve. But they insisted. And I can't really say no to them when they look at me like that. Why are you doing this? The question came out harsher than intended. Emily met his eyes directly, no fear, just honesty. Because they asked. Because they need someone. Because I can help. She shrugged. Not really complicated. It is complicated, Karth said, his voice tight. You're human. Your entire lifespan is barely a fraction of theirs. In 60, maybe 70 years, you'll be gone. And they'll grieve again. Am I supposed to let them get attached to you knowing that? Silence filled the chamber. Emily looked down at her hands, and for a moment, Karth thought he'd hurt her. But when she looked up, her expression was gentle, understanding. Your Majesty, can I tell you about my mom? He nodded, uncertain where this was going. She was a professor. Brilliant woman, taught literature at a university. When I was 15, she got diagnosed with cancer. The doctors gave her maybe 5 years. Emily's voice stayed steady, but her eyes glistened. Everyone told us to prepare for the worst, to protect ourselves emotionally. Some relatives even suggested we start distancing ourselves so it wouldn't hurt as much when she died. What did you do? We loved her harder. Emily smiled through tears. We spent every day like it mattered. Movie nights, long talks, stupid jokes. She lived 4 more years, and they were the best years we ever had as a family. Not because we pretended she wasn't dying, but because we chose to make every moment count. She leaned forward, willing him to understand. Your Majesty, I can't give your daughters centuries. I can't promise I'll be here for their coronations or their children or whatever comes 500 years from now. But I can give them every single day I've got. I can teach them things, listen to them, care about them. I can show them that loving someone isn't about how long you get to keep them. It's about what you do with the time you have. And when you die. The words hurt to say. When they lose you too. Then they'll grieve, Emily said simply. Because grief is just love with nowhere to go. But they'll also have years of memories, lessons learned, moments shared. They'll know that connecting with people is worth the risk of losing them. She paused. Right now, they're learning that lesson the hard way with their mom. Maybe I can help them understand that the pain means the love was real. That it mattered. Korath felt something crack inside his chest. You're asking me to let my daughters love someone who's essentially temporary. Everyone's temporary, Your Majesty. Even Valdrians die eventually. You just get more time to forget that. Emily stood, the oversized robes making her look even smaller. Humans don't have that luxury. We know we're temporary from day one. So we learn to make it count. We burn bright instead of long. She moved toward the window, looking out at the gathering crowds. Your daughters asked me once what humans would do at a festival like this. I told them we'd celebrate life, not perform grief. That we'd honor the dead by living fully, loving openly, risking our hearts even when we know they'll break. That sounds exhausting. It is, Emily agreed with a laugh. It's also beautiful. Your daughters are learning to live that way. They're taking their mom's research and finishing it. They're repairing broken things instead of declaring them unfixable. They're choosing joy even though they're still sad. That's not about me being human. That's about them being brave. Korath joined her at the window. Below, millions gathered to watch the ceremony. The entire empire would see his daughters today, with this human standing beside them. The council is furious, he said quietly. They say I'm disgracing centuries of tradition. That allowing a short-lived species into our most sacred ceremony sets a dangerous precedent. They're probably right, Emily admitted. I'm nobody special. Just a janitor from Earth who happened to be in the right place at the right time. My daughters don't think you're nobody. Your daughters are kind. They're also smart, funny, and stronger than they know. Your wife did an amazing job raising them. Emily turned to face him fully. I'm not trying to replace her. I couldn't if I tried. But I can walk beside them for whatever time I've got. I can be someone who cares, who listens, who shows up. If that's enough for them, then it's enough for me. The Emperor studied this human who spoke about death and love with equal ease, who'd somehow reached his daughters when he couldn't. She was right about one thing: humans burned bright. There was an intensity to them, a fierce commitment to the present moment that his long-lived species had forgotten. You understand what this means, he said finally. Standing with them today makes you part of this family in the Empire's eyes. There's no going back to being just a cleaner. Your life changes today. Yeah, I figured that part out. Emily grinned nervously. Honestly terrifying, but your daughters are worth it. Korath made his decision. The ceremony begins in 2 hours. My attendants will help you prepare properly. He paused at the door. Emily Brooks of Earth, my daughters have chosen you as family. Therefore, so have I. Welcome to the House of Korath. Emily's eyes went wide. Your Majesty, I. Thank you, he interrupted quietly. For giving them back their light. For showing them how to live again. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. For doing what I should have done months ago. You're their dad. You're grieving too. Nobody expects you to be perfect. Seelith did. The words escaped before he could stop them. She always said I spent too much time being emperor and not enough being their father. She was the one who connected with them, who knew what they needed. Without her, I'm lost. Emily walked over and did something incredibly bold and probably inappropriate. She patted his arm, this tiny human comforting an emperor who towered over her. Then figure it out together. Let them see you're struggling too. Let them help you grieve. That's what families do. She smiled. The real kind, not the performance kind. For the first time since Seelith died, Korath felt hope stirring. Not that the pain would disappear, but that maybe, just maybe, they'd find their way through it together. The robes need hemming, he said, returning to practical matters. And you'll need instruction on proper standing positions during the light sequences. I'm gonna mess it up spectacularly, aren't I? Almost certainly, Korath agreed, and they both laughed. Outside, the Empire waited. Inside, a family was learning to heal. The Grand Plaza held 300,000 people, with billions more watching across 12 star systems. The Festival of Starlight transformed the imperial capital into something magical. Crystalline structures caught and refracted light, creating rainbows that danced across buildings. Music filled the air, traditional melodies that had celebrated this day for 8 centuries. Emily stood backstage, absolutely terrified. The ceremonial robes had been tailored to fit her human frame, deep blue fabric with silver threading that caught the light. Someone had woven tiny luminescent crystals into the hem that glowed softly. She looked ridiculous next to the three towering princesses in their traditional garments, their crystalline skin already beginning to pulse with preparatory light patterns. "I'm gonna throw up," Emily whispered. "Please don't," Myra said, though she was smiling. "The robes are borrowed from the Imperial collection. They're 1200 years old." "That doesn't help." Venna grabbed Emily's hand, her own trembling slightly. "We're scared too. You're princesses. You've done this ceremony before." "Not without Mother," Lysra said quietly. "Not like this. We're changing 800 years of tradition in front of the entire empire. If anyone should be throwing up, it's us." They stood together, drawing strength from each other. Through the curtains, Emily could hear the crowd settling, the preliminary speeches beginning. In minutes, they'd walk out there. In minutes, the galaxy would see a human standing with Valdrian royalty. "Last chance to back out," Emily offered weakly. All three sisters squeezed her hands tighter. That was answer enough. The announcement came: Her Highness Princess Lysra, Her Highness Princess Myra, Her Highness Princess Venna, accompanied by honored companion Emily Brooks of Earth. The curtains opened. The crowd's noise hit like a physical wall. Emily had seen videos of the plaza, but nothing prepared her for this. Hundreds of thousands of faces, most non-human, all turned toward them. Cameras floating everywhere, capturing every angle. The weight of billions of eyes watching through screens across the empire. Her legs almost gave out. But Venna held her hand, and that kept her moving forward. They walked to the ceremonial platform, positions marked by ancient tradition. This was where generations of Valdrian mothers and daughters had performed together, weaving light into stories, honoring their lineage. The princesses took their places in a triangle formation. Emily stood to the side, exactly where they'd rehearsed. The witness position, they called it. She just had to stand there and not faint. Surely she could manage that. The ceremony began. Traditional music swelled, ancient instruments creating harmonics that made Emily's bones vibrate. The three sisters began their light display, their crystalline bodies glowing from within. Colors cascaded across their skin in patterns that told stories without words. But these weren't the traditional patterns of grief and loss. These were the sequences they'd created together, celebrating Empress Sealitha's life instead of mourning her death. Lysra's colors showed botanical forms, flowers blooming and cross-pollinating, representing her mother's research. The patterns were beautiful, joyful, alive with discovery. Myra's display showed mechanical precision, gears and systems working in harmony, music boxes singing, representing how Sealith had taught her that broken things could be made whole again. Venna's sequence was pure emotion, colors shifting through every feeling, sadness, yes, but also love, gratitude, hope. The honest truth of grief mixed with celebration. The crowd grew silent, transfixed. This wasn't what they'd expected. This wasn't traditional mourning. Then came the part they'd added, the modification that would either be brilliant or disastrous. All three sisters turned toward Emily. Their light displays shifted to warm golds and gentle blues, colors of gratitude and chosen family. In Valdrian visual language, they were saying thank you and you belong here, and we love you all at once. Emily felt tears streaming down her face. She wasn't supposed to cry. This was supposed to be dignified and formal. But standing there, watching these three incredible people honor both their mother and their newfound connection with her, she couldn't help it. She did the only thing she could think of. She bowed, deep and respectful, human style. Not the Valdrian gesture of formal acknowledgement, but a simple human show of love and respect. The crowd erupted. Not in anger or scandal like Chancellor Vexa had predicted. In cheers. In thunderous applause that shook the plaza. Because everyone watching had just witnessed something unprecedented. Grief transformed into celebration, tradition honored through innovation, and a human being accepted into the imperial family through sheer force of love. The ceremony concluded with the sisters standing together, their light displays unified into a single brilliant pattern. Emily stood beside them, small and dark and utterly human, somehow belonging anyway. Later, the headlines would call it the most watched moment in imperial history. Political analysts would debate its implications for human-Valdrian relations. Traditionalists would argue for weeks about whether it was appropriate. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Four people who'd found each other across species and circumstance stood together, celebrating life and love and the beautiful courage of choosing connection despite inevitable loss. The years that followed became legendary across the empire. Emperor Korath created a new position, Keeper of Hearts. Emily became the official companion and mentor to the imperial daughters. The appointment shocked diplomatic circles and forced every species in the Empire to reconsider humanity's place in galactic society. But the real story happened quietly, in daily moments that cameras never captured. Emily taught the princesses about human resilience. How to find joy after tragedy. How to celebrate birthdays, a human tradition the Valdrians adopted with enthusiasm. How to write handwritten letters when you miss someone, physical words that lasted beyond digital signals. She introduced them to human philosophy about impermanence, how knowing something won't last forever makes it precious rather than tragic. She showed them earth music, messy human art, the beauty of things that existed briefly but burned brilliantly. Lysra became chief diplomat at age 72, young by Valdrian standards. Her first major initiative established grief counseling centers across all member species. She'd learned from Emily that different cultures process loss differently, and all deserved support. The Houses of Hearts, she called them, combining Valdrian resources with human emotional intelligence. Myra revolutionized imperial engineering by incorporating what became known as human-style innovation. Instead of building things to last millennia perfectly, she designed systems that could be repaired, modified, improved. She taught an entire generation of Valdrian engineers that failure wasn't fatal, just part of learning. Venna became a cultural anthropologist, studying how different species understood family, love, and loss. Her groundbreaking research showed that emotional connections mattered more than biological ties. She dedicated every paper to two mothers, the one who'd given her life, and the one who'd taught her how to live it. Emily never let them call her mother. That title belonged to Seelith, sacred and untouchable. She was Aunt Emily, companion, friend, the human who'd walked into their lives and refused to leave when things got hard. Over 30 years, she watched the sisters grow into remarkable leaders. She attended Lysra's diplomatic successes, celebrated Myra's engineering breakthroughs, supported Venna through her research struggles. She taught them human card games and introduced them to chocolate and told them embarrassing stories about her own childhood. She also grew old, because that's what humans do. The Valdrians had medical technology that could have extended her life, maybe doubled it. Emily refused. "I'm human," she'd said simply. "That means something. I don't want to be a bad copy of something else. I want to be fully, completely myself for however long that lasts." In her final years, Emily moved to a suite in the palace. Not because she couldn't care for herself, but because the sisters wanted her close. They'd have dinner together most nights, 3 towering Valdrian women and 1 elderly human, talking about everything and nothing. When Emily's health began failing, the entire empire held its breath. News channels tracked updates. Diplomats sent well wishes. But the real vigil happened in that palace suite, where 3 women who'd learned what love meant sat with their chosen family. Emily died at 79, surrounded by people who loved her. Her last coherent words were variations of "I'm proud of you" to each sister, and "thank you for letting me be part of your story." Emperor Korath, now ancient even by Valdrian standards, attended her funeral personally. He stood before billions and spoke words that became imperial doctrine. "This human gave my daughter something I couldn't." Not because she was special, but because she understood that love transcends time, species, and circumstance. She showed us that family isn't about biology or longevity. It's about showing up, caring deeply, and loving fiercely for whatever time we have. The sisters established the Houses of Hearts in Emily's name. Centers across the empire where anyone grieving could find support, regardless of species. Where short-lived beings weren't dismissed as temporary and long-lived beings learned that connection mattered more than duration. They staffed them with volunteers who understood Emily's central lesson: you don't need forever to make a difference. You just need to be present, honest, and brave enough to love people knowing you'll eventually lose them. In the Imperial Palace garden, they erected a statue. 3 Valdrian princesses, tall and crystalline, sitting with 1 small human woman. They're all laughing in the sculpture, captured in a moment of pure joy. The plaque reads simply, "Emily Brooks, who taught us that the shortest lives cast the longest shadows." Venna visits it most often, even decades later. She'll sit on the bench nearby, sometimes bringing her own students, and tell stories about the human who changed everything. She wasn't a hero, Venna always says. She was just someone who showed up when we needed her. Who chose to care when it would have been easier to walk away. Who proved that you don't need to be special or powerful or long-lived to matter. She'll pause, touching the statue's base where names are carved. She was my art. My friend. My family. And she taught me the most important lesson, that loving someone isn't about how long you get to keep them. It's about what you do with the time you have together. The students always ask the same question, was it worth it? Knowing you'd lose her? And Venna always gives the same answer, the one Emily herself would have given, every single second. Because that's what Emily Brooks taught the Valdrian Empire. That life isn't measured in years but in moments. That grief is just love with nowhere to go. That the bravest thing anyone can do is choose connection despite inevitable loss. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, a small human with a mop and bucket walks into your life and teaches you how to live again. That's legacy enough for anyone.